The Return of Sherlock Holmes, 1905, Episode 12, The Adventure of the Abbey Grange. Welcome back, fellow detectives. We've journeyed through 12 remarkable cases since Holmes's return from the dead, from his dramatic resurrection to missing athletes and hidden revolutionaries. But today's final case in this series brings us full circle to one of Holmes's greatest moral dilemmas. What happens when the law demands justice, but true justice demands mercy? Have you ever witnessed something that was technically a crime but morally justified? What if I told you that sometimes murder can be an act of liberation? Prepare yourself for a case where Holmes must decide whether to serve the law or serve a higher justice, and where his choice will haunt him for years to come. Picture yourself at Baker Street on a freezing January morning in 1897. You've just finished breakfast when Inspector Stanley Hopkins arrives before dawn, his breath steaming in the cold air, his face urgent with the need for Holmes's expertise. "Mr. Holmes, I need you in Kent immediately," Hopkins announces. "There's been a murder at Abbey Grange. Sir Eustace Brackenstall has been killed in his own home. The circumstances are somewhat straightforward, but something about the scene troubles me. I'd value your opinion before we proceed with arrests." Holmes is already reaching for his coat. "Sir Eustace Brackenstall? The name is familiar." Hopkins nods. "Minor aristocracy, wealthy from Australian gold mining. Married about a year ago to a beautiful young woman, Lady Mary Brackenstall. The local gossip suggests the marriage wasn't happy, but that's hardly unusual among the aristocracy." The journey to Abbey Grange takes you through the frozen Kent countryside as dawn breaks. The house is a substantial manor, and the scene of violence is immediately apparent. Broken glass, disturbed furniture, and signs of a struggle. But what strikes you most is the woman sitting in the drawing room, being comforted by her maid. Lady Mary Brackenstall is perhaps 30 years old, beautiful despite a swollen eye and bruised face, with an air of quiet dignity that even her injuries cannot diminish. When she looks up at Holmes, you see something in her eyes. Not just grief or shock, but something more complex. Relief? Defiance? "Lady Brackenstall," Hopkins says gently, "this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes. He's here to help us understand what happened last night. Are you able to tell him what you told me?" She nods, touching her bruised cheek carefully. "3 men broke into the house around midnight. They were burglars, rough-looking men who'd been drinking. I heard the commotion and came downstairs to investigate." Her voice is steady, rehearsed almost. "My husband confronted them in the dining room. There was a struggle, and one of the men, the leader, struck Sir Eustace with a poker from the fireplace. The blow killed him instantly. Then they tied me to a chair, ransacked the house for valuables, and escaped into the night." Think carefully about this account, detective. Does it sound like the testimony of someone who's just witnessed her husband's murder? Where's the hysteria, the breakdown, the trauma you'd expect from such a horrific experience? Holmes examines the dining room where Sir Eustace's body was found. The dead man is sprawled on the floor, his head crushed by a brutal blow from the fireplace poker. Near him on the table are several wine glasses and an opened bottle of good wine. Lady Brackenstall sits bound to a chair with bell ropes, though Hopkins has already freed her. "The burglars drank your wine before they left?" Holmes asks, studying the glasses with his magnifying glass. Lady Brackenstall nods. "Yes, they seem to celebrate their crime. Disgusting behavior." But Holmes's expression suggests he finds something odd about this detail. He examines the bell rope that bound Lady Brackenstall. "These knots are quite interesting. Naval knots, if I'm not mistaken. Reef knots and bowlines, not the clumsy knots common criminals would tie." Hopkins looks startled. "Naval knots? What does that mean?" "It means," Holmes says slowly, "that at least one of these burglars had maritime experience. Sailors tie such knots instinctively, from years of practice." He turns to Lady Brackenstall. "Did any of these men seem like sailors to you? Did they have that particular rolling walk, or the weathered skin of men who've spent years at sea?" Lady Brackenstall hesitates just a fraction too long. I couldn't say. Everything happened so fast and I was terrified. I didn't notice such details." But Holmes has noticed her hesitation, and his eyes narrow with suspicion. Holmes examines the wine glasses more closely. 3 glasses, all used. But look at the wine levels. 2 glasses are half empty, matching each other almost exactly. The 3rd glass has barely been touched. What does that suggest to you, Watson? Watson considers. That 2 people drank normally while the 3rd barely sipped? Perhaps one of the burglars didn't like wine. But Holmes shakes his head. Or perhaps there were never 3 burglars at all. Perhaps someone staged this scene to look like a burglary, but forgot that criminals celebrating a successful robbery would drink more enthusiastically. He kneels beside Sir Eustace's body, examining the fatal wound. This blow was struck with tremendous force. The skull is shattered completely. Either the attacker was extraordinarily strong, or they were in the grip of powerful emotion. Rage, perhaps, or years of accumulated fury finally released. Lady Brackenstall's maid, a middle-aged woman named Teresa Wright, has been hovering protectively near her mistress. Holmes turns his attention to her. Mrs. Wright, you've been with Lady Brackenstall for some time, I understand. The maid nods fiercely. Since before her marriage, sir. I was her mother's maid in Australia, and I've served Lady Mary since she was a girl. Then you knew Sir Eustace well? Holmes probes gently. Teresa's face hardens with unconcealed hatred. I knew him well enough, sir. He was a devil, a brutal, drunken devil who made my lady's life a hell on earth. The things he did to her. She stops, choking on emotion. What things, Mrs. Wright? Holmes asks quietly. But Lady Brackenstall interrupts. Teresa, please. That's not relevant to what happened last night. The maid looks at her mistress with such love and loyalty that you realize instantly, this woman would do anything to protect Lady Mary, including lie to the police. Holmes steps outside to examine the grounds. The supposed point of entry, a window broken from outside, shows glass both inside and outside the house. Curious, Holmes murmurs. If someone broke this window from outside, most of the glass should have fallen inward. But there's nearly as much glass outside as inside. Think about what this means, detective. Someone broke the window from the inside to make it look like an external break-in. The entire burglary scene has been staged, carefully arranged, to deceive the police. Holmes returns to Lady Brackenstall. I need to understand your husband's character. Inspector Hopkins mentioned your marriage was unhappy. Can you elaborate? Lady Brackenstall's composure finally cracks slightly. Sir Eustace was not the man I thought I was marrying. In Australia, he seemed charming and refined. But here in England, once the marriage was secure, he revealed his true nature. He drank heavily, she continues, her voice hollow. And when he drank, he became violent. He struck me repeatedly. You can see the evidence on my face. He threw things, smashed furniture, screamed abuse. Last month, he threw a decanter at me that nearly killed me. Teresa saved my life by pulling me aside. Why didn't you leave him? Watson asks, then immediately regrets the insensitive question. But Lady Brackenstall answers with bitter calm. Leave? And go where? I have no money of my own. Everything I brought to the marriage became his property by law. My family in Australia couldn't afford to support me. And divorce? The scandal would destroy me socially, and the courts rarely favor women anyway. Holmes's expression shows he understands the trap she was in. So you were imprisoned in your own home, married to a violent drunk with no legal means of escape. That must have been unbearable. Lady Brackenstall meets his gaze steadily. It was. But many women endure worse. I'm hardly unique in my suffering. Holmes asks to see the rest of the house, and Lady Brackenstall leads him through the rooms. In Sir Eustace's study, Holmes finds evidence of the dead man's viciousness, broken furniture, holes punched in walls, and most damning, a collection of walking sticks and canes, several with bloodstains on them. He used these on you, Holmes asks quietly, holding up a particularly heavy cane. Lady Brackenstall doesn't answer, but her silence is confirmation enough. Holmes's face hardens with barely controlled anger. Inspector Hopkins, I need to speak with you privately. Outside, Holmes presents his theory. This was no burglary, Inspector. The scene was staged by someone protecting Lady Brackenstall, Most likely a man with naval experience who cared deeply about her welfare. The naval knots, the carefully arranged wine glasses, the broken window from the inside, all point to a deliberate deception. Hopkins looks troubled. Are you suggesting Lady Brackenstall killed her husband and staged the burglary? But Holmes shakes his head. No, I don't believe she struck the blow. But I believe she knows who did, and she's protecting them. The question is, do we expose this deception, or do we allow it to stand? Can you see the moral dilemma here, Detective? Holmes has evidence that the official story is false, but he also understands that Sir Eustace Brackenstall was a monster who brutalized his wife. Does the law demand he reveal the truth, even if truth serves no real justice? Holmes makes an unusual decision. Inspector Hopkins, I'm going to conduct one more interview before I make my conclusions. I'll return to London briefly and consult some sources. Give me 24 hours before you make any arrests. Hopkins, trusting Holmes's judgment, agrees to wait. Back in London, Holmes disappears for several hours, leaving you and Watson to wonder what he's investigating. When he returns that evening, his expression is grim. I've discovered the identity of the man who killed Sir Eustace Brackenstall. His name is Captain Jack Croker, formerly of the Adelaide-Southampton steamship line. He and Lady Mary knew each other in Australia before her marriage. They were in love, Holmes continues. Croker was a poor sailor, not suitable for a young woman of Lady Mary's social position, so she married Sir Eustace for security and respectability. But Croker never forgot her, and when he learned of her suffering, he couldn't stay away. Watson looks shocked. So Croker killed Sir Eustace out of jealousy. But Holmes shakes his head. Not jealousy, protection. I believe Croker came to Abbey Grange to plead with Lady Mary to leave her husband. Sir Eustace discovered them together, attacked Lady Mary violently, and Croker struck him to defend her. The blow was meant to stop him, not kill him, but Croker's strength combined with Sir Eustace's drunken rage made it fatal. Holmes has located Captain Croker at his lodgings in London. The three of you confront him that evening. A tall, powerful man in his 30s, with the weather-beaten face of a lifelong sailor, and eyes that show both guilt and defiance. I won't deny it, Croker says immediately. I killed Sir Eustace Brackenstall, and I'd do it again to save Mary from his brutality. I've loved her since we were young in Adelaide. When I learned she'd married that monster, I stayed away out of respect for her vows. But when I heard how he was treating her, Croker's voice breaks with emotion. I came to see her, to beg her to leave him, to promise I'd take care of her somehow even though I'm not wealthy. Sir Eustace came home drunk and found us talking. He went into a rage, grabbed one of his canes and started beating Mary. I tried to stop him and he came at me with the cane. We fought and I grabbed the poker and struck him. I only meant to knock him down, but he fell and his head hit the floor. He was dead instantly. Mary begged me to flee, but I couldn't leave her to face the police alone. So we staged the burglary. I tied her up with the gentlest knots I knew. We broke the window from inside. I drank some wine to make it look like celebrating burglars. Then I left before the servants discovered the body. Holmes regards Croker steadily. You committed murder, Captain. The law demands you hang for that crime, regardless of the circumstances. But Croker stands straight, accepting his fate. I know. I'm prepared to face whatever punishment comes, but I won't regret saving Mary's life, even if it costs me my own. This is the moment where Holmes must make his most difficult decision. He turns to you and Watson. Gentlemen, I'm going to do something that may shock you. I'm going to let Captain Croker go free. More than that, I'm going to help him escape England before he can be arrested. Watson protests. Holmes, this is murder. We can't just let him walk away. But Holmes's voice is steel. Can't we? Sir Eustace Brackenstall was a violent criminal who beat his wife regularly, terrorized his household, and was moments away from potentially killing Lady Mary when Croker struck him. Croker acted in defense of another person's life. That's not murder. That's justified protection. But the law, Watson begins. Holmes cuts him off. The law that makes a woman her husband's property? The law that gives men the right to beat their wives without consequence? The law that would hang a man for defending a woman from her violent husband while the husband faces no punishment for his brutality. That law is unjust, Watson, and I will not serve it in this instance. Think about Holmes's reasoning here, Detective. He's placing moral justice above legal justice. He's deciding that some laws are so unjust that they deserve to be circumvented. Is he right? Or is he overstepping his role as a detective? Holmes provides Croker with money and arranges passage on a ship leaving for South Africa that very night. Captain, you're a good man who acted to protect someone helpless. The world is better for your actions, not worse. Go build a new life somewhere the British law cannot reach you. Croker grasps Holmes's hand with tears in his eyes. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I know you're risking your reputation to help me. I swear I'll live honorably and never take another life. Holmes nods. I believe you. Now go quickly before Inspector Hopkins realizes I've found you. The next morning, Holmes returns to Abbey Grange and reports to Hopkins. Inspector, I've investigated thoroughly, and I believe Lady Brackenstall's account is substantially accurate. 3 burglars broke in, killed Sir Eustace in a struggle, and escaped. The evidence supports this conclusion. It's a lie the first time you've seen Holmes deliberately deceive the police, but he delivers it with absolute conviction. Hopkins, trusting Holmes completely, closes the case as a burglary gone wrong. Lady Brackenstall is free to mourn her husband publicly while celebrating her liberation privately. Captain Croker escapes to Africa and is never heard from again. And the brutal Sir Eustace Brackenstall is buried with full honors, his viciousness known only to those he terrorized. Back at Baker Street, Holmes sits in troubled silence for a long time. Finally, he speaks. Watson, I've done something today that violates everything I've stood for as a consulting detective. I've obstructed justice, helped a killer escape, and lied to the police. And yet, I cannot bring myself to regret it. Sir Eustace Brackenstall was a monster who made his wife's life a hell on earth, Holmes continues. The law not only failed to protect her, but actively prevented her from escaping. When Captain Croker intervened to save her life, he performed an act of mercy that the law would have punished with hanging. I couldn't allow that injustice to stand. Watson pours them both large brandies. You took the law into your own hands, Holmes. You appointed yourself judge and jury. Holmes nods heavily. I did, and that terrifies me, because it means I've crossed a line I swore I'd never cross. Who am I to decide which laws deserve enforcement and which deserve circumvention? But sometimes, Watson says quietly, the law and justice are not the same thing. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. Holmes looks at his friend gratefully. Thank you, Watson. I needed to hear that, even if I'm not sure I believe it. So tell me, Detective, do you agree with Holmes's decision to let Captain Croker escape? Was he right to place moral justice above legal justice? And what does this case teach us about the difference between law and righteousness? This morally complex case reminds us that justice is not always found in courtrooms and legal codes. Sometimes true justice requires mercy, requires looking beyond the letter of the law to its spirit and purpose. Sir Eustace Brackenstall's death was technically murder, but it was also the only way to save Lady Mary from continued brutality. It also reveals the darkest corner of Victorian society, the legal enslavement of married women, who had no rights, no property, no means of escape from violent husbands. Holmes's decision to help Croker was not just about one case, but about refusing to participate in a legal system that enabled such injustice. This case shows us Holmes at a moral crossroads, choosing mercy over strict legal justice. But his struggles with these difficult decisions are far from over.